Hello, welcome to the first ever Krackle Comics Mini-Sode review. We're trying something a little bit different where we're gonna try to review smaller things that maybe we just will never get around to unless we created something else. It's also a makeup since we didn't do a show last week, but Birth Month is coming later this week, so stay tuned for that. But we looked at a collection of miniseries and we came to the conclusion of it's kind of the perfect time, Vince, to review the first Falcon miniseries from 1983, the four-issue miniseries by Christopher Priest, then Jim Owsley. But I think this is a fun one. First issue drawn by Paul Smith, and issues 3 through 4 drawn by M.D. Bright, inked by Vince Colletta. So, did you say this was? You were telling me Priest had only previously written some like Conan stuff. This is his first like Marvel Universe written work.
Yeah, it's definitely the first Marvel Universe. I don't think he's actually, well, first of all, technically Conan is in the Marvel Universe, like even before, recent times. It's just a different era. There's connections even back then with Shuma Gorath and Doctor Strange and stuff like that. But I think this is basically his first thing in general. So I guess, do we want to jump into some of the background stuff now?
Yeah, let's quickly, Vince. If for anyone who didn't just watch the biggest show on Disney Plus after the ratings and numbers came out, if you're unfamiliar with who Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon, later on Captain America, is, tell us a little about Sam Wilson.
Yeah. So, well, my notes are kind of more behind the scenes,
Right,
publishing history, but the Falcon first appeared in Captain America number 117 in 1969, created by Stan Lee and Gene Colan. And originally he's green, number one, but number two, he also doesn't get the wings initially until Captain America number 170, quite a while later. And he actually gets them from Black Panther, from T'Challa. They're like a Wakandan technology. And in the Marvel Universe, he's from Harlem, whereas if you watch the MCU, they have him from Louisiana, I believe. And he, I guess theoretically, he could have shown up in Cap 117 and then, he's just a one-off ally and then he disappears, or he only infrequently shows up. But he pretty quickly became essentially Cap's, sidekick slash partner, pretty similar to the original Bucky format. And he shared co-billing on the cover of Cap from issues 134 to 222, which is basically most of the entire 1970s. And it's similar, as far as just partners and sharing the title, the changed title for a short period, at least on the cover, similar to Daredevil and Black Widow's relationship through a chunk of the 70s as well. And as far as the creative here, so Christopher Priest's birth name, as Mike mentioned, is James Owsley, and he was hired as an intern, then quickly a full-time as an editor in 1978, basically exactly when Falcon becomes a little bit less frequent in the Captain America book, just coincidentally. And he's initially an assistant to Larry Hama, and he's working, and he may have, written minor things, I don't really know, but he was working on the title Crazy, which was basically Marvel's ripoff of Mad Magazine. And then he was editing some Conan, and eventually after this, he writes some Conan. And I think that's one of his first ongoing gigs on the writing side. But he also then fell under the wing of editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and was kind of like his protege. And so I thought this was interesting because this series is edited by Shooter, and Mike's going to get into it, but Priest pitched this series to Shooter, and Shooter liked it. And then there were some issues, but it's interesting that it's edited by Shooter and not Mark Grunwald, who was at the time the editor of both Captain America and Avengers, because after Falcon kind of leaves the Captain America book, he quickly joins the Avengers for a brief period, around like the 180 to 190 issues of that title. And it's kind of it's an interesting part of the character's history, but it's slightly dated maybe, because basically he's brought into the Avengers by government mandate for diversity reasons, but Sam wasn't really interested in the first place, so he basically ends up quitting after a period. And this is the first title called Falcon. You know, you can see in the bottom of the screen if you're watching the video that it says Falcon Volume 1. But he had a previous solo adventure in Marvel Premiere number 49 in 1979, which was written by Mark Evanier and drawn by Sal Buscema, longtime Cap artist. And Priest actually wrote a letter in response to that, which ran a couple issues later, criticizing that issue's portrayal of Black characters. And I'm not certain, though, if he was employed yet. But that's interesting. As we then, I think we're pretty much ready to jump into the book.
Yeah, we are. And I'll keep it just on both of us just for ease of access. But I'll get in some back matter here. How this series basically came about. It's Priest. He writes in the back matter of the first material of the first issue that he pitched the idea for a Falcon story to then editor in chief of Marvel, Jim Shooter, who loved the idea, and to get, you know, he's like, oh, this sounds good. Let's get some up and coming artist on this. That would be Paul Smith to draw it. Though the story was originally intended was like, well, where are we going to put this thing? It became like well, let's put it in fanfare. And Milgram was like, hey, I like this, but also, if you know anything about the convoluted history of Marvel fanfare, he constantly had things to run in it, so it would just kept getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And he pitched this in 81, and I guess it was ready to go, but then, you know, nothing comes of it. And then eventually Shooter comes back with, he's like, what if we do a limited series? And at that point, Priest is like, yeah, that sounds good, but they had the one issue done, and Paul Smith is now busy drawing X-Men, so you can't get Paul Smith to draw it. So they get MD Bright, who he mentioned was doing like commercial work at the time too. So it was like he would do this and then that, and pulled him away from that to draw this series. And overall, you know, they reached out and they got a deal done, and here we are with a limited series that Shooter edits himself. Though the first issue of the series very much reads like a one-shot that you would find in Marvel fanfare, and that's the one that Paul Smith draws, titled Winners and Losers, and it heavily plays on Sam Wilson's role as a social worker inside his Harlem community, where he works in and out of costume. The opening sees that Falcon stops a kid named Miguel from assaulting a young girl while he's drunk, and he meets up with his partner for this series is going to be this kind of hard-nosed, over-the-top New York detective named Sergeant Torque, who carries like a modified shotgun. It's very dated and weird even then, but through the lens now, even kind of weirder. Though he manages to stop the kid and bring him in, and then save the girl. But they stop a drug raid where the bust is empty because Falcon already intercepted it from stopping Miguel. So Sam also stops a corrupt builder, Daryl Kane, from carrying out his like shoddy building practices in an already rough area of Harlem. And he ends up fighting him because he's got some power suit calling himself Nemesis. And Miguel gets captured by Nemesis after peeking in a doorway and seeing him put on the suit. And then he gets caught. Sam, early in the issue, though, and this is where it's going to show Sam playing, you know, in and out of costume, the role where he lives, he managed to convince the girl and her father of dropping charges on Miguel, showing, you know, Sam has his compassion belief that he can become a good person if he's, you know, given another chance. And also like very heavy handed to like, hey, don't, you know, stay off booze. But Nemesis' plan is to destroy this building site and then reap in the money off the insurance. The conclusion is that the real winner of the day is Miguel, who he's freed, and then also he gets his job back. And it looks like he's going to turn over a new leaf. So Sam looks like he's, you know, done his job. If it's one small thing, but also, you know, he's helped his community in that. And overall, a pretty self-contained issue. Paul Smith's art's really good. I'm a big Paul Smith fan from his work on X-Men. And Vince, you can go into it. I didn't notice anything different from Vince Colletta's inks because it would have been Terry Austin, I believe, inking him on X-Men. So no big difference really in the pencils. But for a one and done story that you would have, you know, maybe seen in Marvel Fanfare or Marvel Premiere, this isn't bad. Like, it's a very good first issue story that's a one and done. But any thoughts on the first issue, Vince?
Yeah, I think the first issue on its own is great. Small correction that I believe on X-Men, Smith was with Bob Wyachek actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I didn't. It didn't scream like Colletta ruined it to me. Since this was drawn before the other issues, I think this was a while before Paul Smith is on X-Men, and he was a bit younger. So I'm not. I think it looks great, but it also is like just a little bit tad more house style like than maybe what you see from him on X-Men, and it's not that far off from Bright, who is the artist on the upcoming issues. And I kind of associate Mark Bright, not in a negative way at all, but I kind of associate him with like a little bit of a house style look. And so that you really, it's not super obvious that there's a different artist on these until you like look closely, and it doesn't look better or worse, but it also looks good. I like how the first issue really establishes the series where we're balancing Sam's superheroics with his social work and day job and those kinds of issues. Deals with all the elements of the neighborhood and matches the threats pretty well. I actually really like Sergeant Torque. He's got a unique enough look to be, a recognizable character. I like his shotgun gimmick, and he kind of explains it where he's like, yeah, like, I mean, like he's presented as like a good cop, all things considered, but he's a little bit edgy. He's a little bit off the beaten path. He doesn't wear his uniform. He's got the shotgun, and he gives a little bit of leeway with certain people in the community. And he's constantly referencing the Late Show, and in the end, later on he even wears a jacket which is branded with like the Dave Letterman Show. And he's basically just a Priest character. He does appear again. He's carried forward for Priest's Spider-Man Gang War arc, where Falcon also shows up for a guest appearance, and occasional other appearances in Spidey, basically while Priest was editing that line. And then he actually has a ton of appearances in Black Panther under Priest, but then he hasn't shown up since Priest left Black Panther, which I think is kind of unfortunate because I mean, I think he's a kind of cool character. I think at some point along the way, like in Black Panther, he gets wounded in some way, and he's even believed to be dead, but he doesn't die. So I don't remember off the top of my head like fully what happens to him, but I feel like he's a cool character that if you're writing Sam Wilson, especially in modern arcs where he's often Captain America and stuff, if he ever goes back to the neighborhood, I think he's a cool character that you could easily bring back in.
You know who he reminds me of? It just jotted to me in terms of look, maybe not so much attitude, like some overlap, but Eddie Fires from when we've looked at those Green Arrow issues. He's the guy that hangs with Connor Hawke.
Yeah,
they kind of similar.
Yeah, and like not really similar at all, but like slightly remind me of that one Gotham cop, the one who like goes crazy during No Man's Land.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like that guy was like, he was an actual crack job, like crazy, abusive cop.
Yeah, super
people.
insane.
But like, as far as, when you initially meet that character, it's more like the gung-ho, off the beaten path guy. So like, and like vaguely similar appearance maybe. But I think it's cool when you have these kinds of, it's kind of a weird gray area where if you have superheroes interacting too much with actual law enforcement, but if you can execute it well, I think that's where you get some of the coolest supporting characters in superhero comics.
Yeah, and then I'll share the solicit synopsis for this issue, as I think they put it over pretty strong here, where it's forget Hill Street Blues, forget Saint Elsewhere, forget Fort Apache, the Bronx. It's tough, it's contemporary, it pulls no punches. It's Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon. It's real, and then just word after it. So it, pretty putting it over pretty strong here. I don't know, Vince, because I don't think you're a historian of television necessarily like I might be, but those were all pretty popular TV shows on at the time. So they're saying it's bigger than all these three shows. Go read this. It's at least saying it's more real than what you're going to see on TV.
Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar with those. I do want to point out the word at the end because I feel like it might be more prominent in this first issue, mostly because this issue has way more interaction with the neighborhood. than the other issues as we get into slightly different subject matter, or at least more of a mix. But we do get some slang here, and obviously I'm not from New York, and I'm not from New York in the 80s and everything like that. I'm, if you're watching the video, you could see I'm not African American either. But I didn't oftentimes, whether it's a current book or an old book, you see, the integration of slang and that kind of speak, and it's always terrible. And it's basically, I mentioned how Priest wrote a letter in about the last Sam Wilson solo adventure, basically complained about that. And I think it all works perfectly here. Obviously, just in a literal sense, some of it's dated because people aren't using the same slang in 2021. But I buy it all. It's not cringy. It doesn't seem inauthentic. And I think it adds to the experience as well when it's executed properly.
Yeah, and I would say it's executed very well. Where the issue puts over a lot that Sam is very much a focal point in this community, and you're dropped right here, where I think it definitely does feel more real than something else that you might have read from a different writer at this time as well. So carrying that forward, I'll go into issue 2, which this is pretty much where it carried the start of the rest of our, obviously the start of the rest of our series, but is going to be basically a 3-issue storyline that's going to see Falcon try to bring peace between these two rival gangs, but things go horribly wrong when during a peace march of the gangs like trying to come together and unite Harlem, a rookie officer basically accosts one of the gang members, and then a scuffle starts, and then he shoots and murders a member of one of the gangs, and then even Sergeant Torque was there. He's like, "What are you doing?" But Falcon's nowhere to be seen because while he was on his way to the parade, by the way, a full-blown riot has now gone down in Harlem because of this. But Sam gets caught up with fighting a reactivated Sentinel that put himself back together. And we even get a cliff note, Vince. I want to know what you thought of this, too. It's the same Sentinel that Cyclops hit with an optic blast back in X-Men number 98. We even get a cliff note for that. So this is smack dab in the middle in the time where Falcon maybe believed that he was a mutant from his powers. Today, though, it's pretty much canon that we know he got his powers from Cosmic Cube shenanigans from the Red Skull. And that goes back to his early appearances. So the Falcon's MIA and the gang's believing that they set him up. So he's got kind of a ton of work to do when he gets back to try to set things right here, as Harlem's kind of thrown into a huge riot situation.
Yeah, I think I don't have a problem with the Sentinel thing. I think it's cool. I mean, that issue was
No, I didn't think you were gonna have a problem with it. I just thought, what did you think about the cliff notes? Even going back to like referencing the issue, like it's the same one that Cyclops fired an optic blast at. I think it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, that issue's several years ago at this point when this was published, but that's totally in the traditional Marvel. The whole point of footnotes is linking things, and oftentimes it is a stretch, but that's what makes it kind of fun. Yeah, I think the switch to Bright is not a total whiplash on the art for me. We kind of already mentioned that. We get a really badass Red Wing moment here as he flies into the Sentinel and puts in some work. And I'm a kind of a low, it's like maybe like a quarter ironic, but I'm a big Red Wing fan. And this moment would not be remotely as cool if he's just a drone. And so I'm a supporter of Red Wing as a bird. And the mutant Falcon thing, just, we have the Sentinel thing here. That goes back to the Secret Empire arc of Captain America in the 70s, which a couple issues within there were basically also a loose X-Men crossover while that title was canceled before Giant Size. And Priest is like maybe trying to strengthen that idea, or really just connecting the continuity to it, because the easy sidestep is just that, obviously we see this is the Sentinel that got screwed up by Cyclops. So you just excuse, the Sentinel is malfunctioning, which I think was actually Priest's intention, but it's not made quite clear enough in the script. I don't like Sam as an actual mutant. I think that's a really stupid idea. But I like, now that it was resolved, I like the tease that for some stupid reason, Professor X questioned it at some point, and that is like a weird little part of his history that it was a possibility at one point. But I don't really like how it was cleaned up, where basically it's this and then the Snap Wilson persona, which I won't get into that much, but both of those were kind of tackily, in my opinion, retconned by like, oh, Red Skull Cosmic Cube thing, and I think a minor part of it was retconned in like the Busiek Avengers run. There's like one annual of Avengers where Busiek was just like, I'm gonna retcon everything. He like fixed the crossing and fixed like 20 things all in one issue. Just like every stupid part of Avengers history that he disagreed with. But then it's also this like mutant thing and other and the Snap, more so the Snap Wilson thing, is also like really awkwardly, in my opinion, from what I recall, handled uh, quickly in Remender's Captain America immediately as Sam becomes Cap in that series. And I like these things because they're like hidden wrinkles in his backstory, and I think if they're handled well retroactively, I think they're fine. And I don't really like wiping the slate of them, but that's pretty much on the second issue. I like Red Wing. I like the X-Men connection.
I like the cover with him with the Sentinel looming over him. I think that was a good cover. I think issue 1 might be my favorite of the covers though.
Yeah,
But I
no,
would say they're all pretty good.
yeah, I actually like the issue 1 cover is really, really cool. Like it's especially there's something about the colors where it's his red costume and his darker skin against like a stark like blue bricked background. It just really, really pops. And the cover, the first issue cover is by Paul Smith. Actually, does he do all the? I think he does all the covers. Paul Smith does do the covers at least, or no, just the first 2.
Yeah.
But I think the first cover is amazing. The fourth cover is pretty cool too.
Yeah. Definitely ones that like if you're I did a quick eBay search. It's going the lot of the 4 issues is climbing in price now. So if you want to try to track them down, now's the time to do it. But
There is a trade called Cap. It's one of those things where they put 2 titles on it for marketing purposes. It's called Captain America: The Falcon or something. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's also really up in price at this exact moment. But that has this miniseries and I believe the Marvel premiere issue that I mentioned earlier, and maybe the first appearance. I'm not sure, but at the very end of the show, I'll kind of go into kind of that collector angle a tiny bit more as we close out.
all right, and I'll move into issue 3 with that. Third issue, Falcon has been keeping real busy. He's opened with saying he's been working over 18 hours straight. As we know, it was open to him saving people from a burning building. Back in his apartment, Sergeant Torque finds that some of the Legion gang are there, and he ties them up, believing they were there to rob Sam to send a message. And Falcon tries to reach them, and he's like, hey, let's let him go. Let's talk this out. But they escape and knock him out, and they want no business in talking. So Falcon and Torque have to basically manage and bring them back in, and they do at the police station. So while all of this has been going on, the Spider-Man villain Electro has been watching and basically is planning to strike against Falcon. There's also the President of the United States has announced that he's going to make a visit to Harlem to address the violence. So everyone included is basically, put on notice inside the police station, but Falcon's thrown out because they view him. I think the police captain is like, we don't need help from superheroes or something. So they immediately toss Falcon out. But so Falcon's like, all right, well, I guess I'll go out and help people while they're not going to stay in there and get ready for the president. So the Falcon is checking in on the people he saved from the fire, and one of them is one of his friends who is basically trying to commit suicide and on a building. So Falcon gets on the building with him and talks him down. He owned a shop, and he was like thinking with the fire everything was basically for naught now, but he talks him down and saves him. Then the conclusion of this basically is that Electro sees that and thinks that it's like some staged thing in order to get to him. So Electro then makes his strike, and he basically knocks out Sam and takes him prisoner. And then the real conclusion sees that as the president's making his entrance, he's going to get kidnapped by the Legion gang, and Captain America is arriving on the scene, and he runs in to Sam's apartment only to find Sergeant Torque there. Because he's been captured by Electro. So Cap and Sergeant Torque are going to have to team up to find out where where the heck the Falcon is, because they need his help too. So that's a pretty good cliffhanger for, you know, your penultimate issue. What's going to go on? We got Falcon knocked out by Electro, who was a fun villain to have here, full costume and all. And then we have, of course, Cap making his appearance, because I feel like there was no way you weren't going to have a Cap appearance in here, but it's immediately not to the point of like, all right, immediately team up with Falcon. He's got to go team up with Sergeant Torque because they got to figure out where Falcon is. Overall, another, you know, very basic but good issue here.
Yeah, if anything, I thought the art leveled up in this issue. The opening with the fire, I thought that was really impressive. Like the you know, this is back in the era where almost always the first page of an issue you had a splash, and it's a really great splash. And then even so, yeah, in the next couple pages, you see Falcon, you know, using his wings and diving in and out of windows in these buildings that are on fire and saving people. I thought it was a really great showing for kind of what makes his abilities so unique. You know, especially like, you know, it's basically him and like Angel slash Archangel sometimes, and obviously sometimes Archangel has the whole like flechette wings thing. He has projectiles and stuff, but it can be challenging to show a character who just has wings, like how to make them look really cool. But if you actually are able to execute it, like it's a dude with wings, like it can be really, really cool. And that's where I think, you know, the MCU also played with other ideas, like he uses his wings as like a shield at sometimes, which I think is really cool, or he'll like smack people with the wings essentially. But I think the MCU, especially, I don't remember. Yeah, it's the opening of Falcon Winter Soldier, where he's like chasing someone and he's going around helicopters and everything, and he's
Yeah,
in
he's
the
chasing after Batroc, and he's using them in all sorts of different ways. But then even later in the show, he's using them defensively and offensively, either fighting Flag Smasher or John Walker. They do a
yeah.
lot of really cool visual stuff with the wings in the show.
Yeah, it's just really impressive, and especially the opening on that show, I think really showed like, hey, a guy who can fly it's actually really cool. Um, and uh, yeah, there's other great moments here on the heroic bent, like he stops a suicide jumper, and then on paper, Electro is one of those villains where like he should be ridiculously powerful. Like his powers are pretty up there, but in terms of his actual like impact, usually in the Marvel universe and where he kind of tiers in the pantheon of villains, he's actually a really good match here for Falcon. You know, Elektra's second appearance was against Daredevil, and he was actually pretty much a shared villain between Spidey and Daredevil in the Silver Age before he like fully shifted in the Spidey direction. Um, but he kind of lives up to his potential in this story. He does like pose an actual threat, as opposed to more modern Spidey stories where Electro and even a lot of other villains, they're basically treated as a joke, except for like the top like 2 to 4 villains that, you know, can actually be credible threats. And so I think, you know, at on the surface, if you just know Electro as Spider-Man villain and you don't really like fully understand that, especially in the like older eras, like villains would just, you know, they'd switch and swap and they'd show up everywhere. You at the surface you'd be like, this is a weird fit, but I think it actually works pretty well.
Yeah, I think it works really well too, and especially when we get into issue 4 of how Sam's going to have to outwit Electro, because Sam's wings even get broken in the next issue. It provides a pretty big scale threat for Electro, and then with the gang stuff, you know, kind of on the back burner. But I'll go into issue 4, which is your final issue. We get the big fight with Electro and the team up with Cap, along with Falcon and Torque. The beginning though is the case, basically the chase to get Falcon and rescue him. We have Electro, like I said, he breaks his wings later on, but he's like kind of caught him up in some hideout, and then Cap and Torque are trying to track him down, and they basically go to one of the Legion gang hideouts, thinking that's where he is. They're trying to find Sam, and Torque and Cap eventually manage to get to the gang leader who's holding a gun to the president's head, and that's right where we converge. We're like, boom, busting through the wall is Falcon and Electro, and they manage to take out Cap in the scuffle, and then so Cap's out of commission. So now it's just fully up to Sam to de-escalate here and save the day, which is good, because I felt like if Cap were to just show up and then just save the day, it would have been a real disservice to the whole entire thing. So the fight between Electro and Falcon manages to go to an underground car park where he gets his wings torn off, like they get broken. So Red Wing's able to distract Electro long enough for Sam to basically spray him with the fire hose, which takes him out. So back at the hideout, Sam is able to talk the gang down and frames it to prove and show that the president, like the whole point is to show that the president how tough life in this part of the city is and show how they need help. The I get what they're going for, but the day is saved and that all three of our heroes did enjoy some brews at Falcon's apartment at the end. But I think it wraps up a little too nicely. But overall, it's a pretty fun and exciting finale with everything converging at the head here. I would say we geeked out on MD Bright's art back when we read, I think it was Iron Man 200, with the Silver Centurion suit in the fight against Ironmonger, but it still looks really great here. Like, so a lot of fun stuff here in the finale.
Yeah, I think there's really strong Cap action sequences, as he shows up for the obligatory team up. This was something I couldn't mention in the previous issue, but if this was intended as like a Falcon ongoing or something, you'd bring in Cap for the sales boost, and you could argue it comes off like a little iffy. Like it's totally not Deus Ex Machina, obviously, but like you could have potentially figured out a way to just finish this with Sam and have it be fully a Falcon story that he solves on his own. But obviously, for obvious reasons, it makes total sense for Steve to come help out, especially given where the stakes rise. And this president is clearly Ronald Reagan, of course. And I can buy if someone wanted to criticize that this series is kind of unfocused in terms of subject matter, because especially that first issue, I mean, there is a dumb like costume dude in the first issue, but we have serious issues with a little dash of politics, and then we have a Sentinel attack, and then the president gets kidnapped. But I think it's right in line with any other Marvel comic of the era. You'd only really have a problem if you're going into this thinking that you're getting like a specific, removed social work Sam Wilson thing. And the atypical production schedule also explains some of that. But also, even in this era, most miniseries were not yet like singular, super tight arcs. Even within a 4-issue miniseries, you could have multiple stories. Yeah, I thought this overall was really great on the art, on the writing. It's not perfect. I think Priest really, really improves as he, obviously as his career goes on, as he writes more. And, I wouldn't rank this towards the top, but especially for Sam Wilson, I think this is really, this is definitely worth reading.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like I said, I think I said it wrapped up nicely, but it's also like, this isn't the book where you're going to get super deep into those discussions. It's only 4 issues. It's only a miniseries, but the fact that you're going to bring them up and address them is good in itself. And I did like that. I thought MD Bright's a little, his Ronald Reagan looks not as much like Ronald Reagan as you'd think. It feels like it's kind of half Reagan, but half generic. So like, I don't know if they were worried about it being Reagan or not. I'll put it like this. It's not Dark Knight Returns where that's fully Reagan. This is more of like I'll equate it to like one of the James Bond games was like, it's Pierce Brosnan, but it's not Pierce Brosnan kind of thing. That's kind of what that felt like here. But overall, like, I think this is really, really good. The Paul Smith first issue is good. The Bright issues for, I almost prefer, honestly, and I think I'll say it, like, I prefer the Bright issues for 2 through 4 instead of just Paul Smith. And like I said, if you really want to go into the differences, it's going to be in how the character builds are going to look. Bright's going to have a little bit more of like that John Byrne kind of more stiff, muscular look. While to me, Paul Smith's characters have always been a little bit more slender and athletic looking, but nothing that you're going to like completely break for you. To compare it to another work of Captain America and Falcon that Priest wrote, being Captain America and the Falcon, the first 2 issues of that are remind me who it is because I'm not fond of that artist.
Bart Sears.
Yeah, Bart Sears. So I would take this over Bart Sears drawing Cap and Falcon any day of the week, as I'm just not a big Bart Sears fan. But it is interesting though to note that years later, Priest will come back to Captain America and the Falcon, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and then literally tomorrow, as we record this, obviously you could be listening to this whenever, but tomorrow, I believe, his miniseries on U.S. Agent finishes. So if you kind of add it all up, Priest, in a sideways manner, has done like 25 issues of Captain America comics. Kind of interesting. And then just some quick nerdy / collector notes that I want to throw out there. So the continuity of this series is a little iffy, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that it was initially planned earlier and then put back on the schedule and everything.
I'm interested to what you have to say, because I read some of the back matter material of the issue, and there's an interview with Priest where he does clarify where this takes place.
Okay, well, I didn't read that, so I might actually be, missing something. But if you go to certain different sites where people try and line up all the Marvel books and everything like that, this either takes place right before or right after Sam has his attempt to run for Congress during the J.M. DeMatteis run in Captain America, because as part of that, for a period while he's running, he actually gives up the superhero persona and stops wearing the costume. So it kind of has to be on either side, and there's no at least within the story, there's no direct reference to where this fits in Captain America. But there's not really any contradictions, so you can kind of maybe go either way.
Well, if you're wondering for the answer, Priest says it takes place before he announces to run, which that makes sense, because he still actively is Falcon here.
And then on the collector side, so this miniseries probably should be expected in Captain America Epic Volume 11, which will be the final volume right before the Mark Grunwald stretch, and also that will be the volume which has the death of the Red Skull, which we discussed the final issue of that on an episode or two ago on our show. And again, hopefully it's in that. And while the Marvel Premiere issue that I mentioned earlier, the first solo story should probably be in Cap Epic Volume 8. And Falcon had a handful of other solo stories in the 80s and 90s across, anthology type and fill-in type books like Solo Avengers, Marvel Comics Presents. None of them are hugely important, and for better or worse, none of them are really collected. Especially with the success of Falcon Winter Soldier, I mean, I could see, and I feel like they should put out some kind of book with the miniseries with Marvel Premiere, basically bulking up the previous version, which is probably out of print right now anyways. But who knows?
Well, this not only does this line up kind of timely for us to do it, but it's also kind of a fun capstone for us if you want to trace mini histories of Captain America and Falcon stuff we did, because one of our retro issues was the issue where Falcon got his wings. I don't know if you remember that, because we did talk about that issue.
Yeah, loosely.
But we talked about that issue. Now we talked about this. We've talked about Cap 300. Maybe eventually down the line we'll do more stuff, but this is kind of like a fun cap off to all that, at least for beginning history for Falcon, which is pretty fun to have said. But overall, anything else to mention here? I think this is a really if you don't have this, go search for it when cons are a thing again, or if your LCS is stocked up on back issues. This is one to find, because this is a hidden gem, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a really cool series.
And then I would say, even for me, Sam being very compassionate and empathetic to people and trying to talk them down. There's a lot of the character in that here that I feel is taken for the show, because if you haven't watched the show, there's a lot of him where he tries to de-escalate, and in the MCU he was used as he was a counselor for veterans, and that history is there for that. But there's a lot of this here as his work as a social worker, where he's very good at communicating with people, which is something that I was kind of like cool to see that, oh, that goes all the way back to this. Now, obviously not a direct line to that, but it is kind of cool to see, tidbits here and there of how things formed throughout history, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, the MCU leans more on him, well, basically introduces him as being a military man. And I think it was a smart choice for the MCU because it then serves as a really great parallel, him as a modern member of the military compared to Cap, and they have that instant connection and also differences that they can compare notes on and connect with. But then as it went on and in the show, it is nice how they pulled in and integrated some of that social work and that kind of community engagement kind of background. So the MCU tweaks everything. I think I actually haven't watched the finale for Falcon Winter Soldier yet, even though due to the internet, I kind of know what certain things happen and also just expectations. Yeah. But so far, having not watched the finale, I've really liked Sam Wilson's portrayal in the entire MCU. The only sticking point for me is that Red Wing should be a bird, not a drone.
And that's a very loose thing. It is funny that we've come this far with Sam Wilson in the MCU and he hasn't gotten any kind of powers. It is kind of funny that they never went that route with it, and it would have been cool if they did. But it's cool to see that like he stands this high now without needing any of that. I think you'll like the finale. They do a couple things with Red Wing that's cool in the finale. He kind of uses it kind of like an all-seeing eye kind of deal, but it would be cool. Well, I guess now in the comics, Red Wing is part vampire too, so I don't know how you feel about that. But I think Red Wing is with Joaquin Torres now. I don't even know if Sam still has him.
That vampire thing from that Falcon solo series that basically no one read? Or yeah. When did that?
I think that happened during Spencer, but I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But that's all we got. We'll definitely track this one down. This is enjoyable. I think the mini-sodes are fun. I don't think we're going to do these consistently, and I think our goal is to have other people chime in on these. But as far as a first one, I think it was a fun one to do. I don't know when you can expect the next one, but if you watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, go watch this or go seek this out and read this, because I think if you got a handling for more Sam Wilson material, this is definitely one to track down. So this is all we got for you. We'll have the regular show for you on Friday. Stay tuned. Stay safe. Bye.